there's sometimes when you get on the phone and you have this pre-call, I call them, for the show. And I knew there would be an interesting pre-call, but I could remember I was buzzing after this because Marc that's on the show today, in many ways has a very bold and ambitious maverick vision for what the kind of business he wants to build. And he's already doing quite well and won lots of awards in a short time of his business lifespan for people and so on, and have very content-intuitive ideas about how to both serve the employees and the customer in a world that is changing a lot in the moment and in an industry where things are tough. So I'm super excited to welcome you to the show, Marc, and have a conversation about your journey and the maverick things you're doing.
Thanks, Michael. Pleasure to be here.
Marc, could we start with where did it all started and why a restaurant business?
Yeah, I mean, it was never really part of the plan. I mean, I went to school, then I went to university, studied business, and then got a job in finance. But at kind of every critical age point that I mentioned there, I always flirted with the idea of becoming a chef. Always loved food. It was something that I was always passionate about growing up. And I think it just got to the point where I was 25 years old. I was in Australia at the time, and I was watching an episode of Chef's Table with Francis Baumann. And it was as if he was talking to me directly. I was sat there on my sofa, hungover on Bondi Beach, watching this episode. And I can't remember the exact quote, but he said, "You're never going to get anywhere by lying on your sofa." And it honestly sparked a flame in me. I got my CV and just started handing it out to any restaurant that would take me just to start off. I knew I had to give this a go.
And what was it that you thought, was it because you were deeply interested in food as a hobby? Or was it like because you always wanted to end up in the restaurant industry? Because finance and restaurant, they're bipolar, yeah? Like almost.
Yeah. Look, I loved cooking. I loved eating. Every possible opportunity I'd be going out for dinner, but I'd also love cooking at home. And when I grew up, I was always cooking for myself from a very early age. So I think at that point, I think the ambition was always a restaurant, but I definitely thought I just wanted to just dip my toes into the industry to see if it was something that I'd want to do.
And what happened then? You got a job in the industry eventually. What happened then? What was the journey from getting that job to leap into the big decision of building your own little empire?
Yeah, I think the first job that I got was in Australia as a prep chef, and on the opening night, the head chef actually walked out, and instead of prepping, I was given a section, and I just remember the adrenaline that I got from that service. It was like nothing I'd felt before. Maybe something you'd get if you played sport and you'd scored a goal or something like that. It was really an incredible moment. And I'd get home after my shift finish at 1 a.m. and I'd be Skyping my family back home. I was energized by it, and I think from that moment, that's when I knew that I was on the right path. And so I kind of was really laser focused at that point. I came back to London once my visa expired, and I just set myself a 5-year plan to learn everything I could, back of house, front of house, on the admin side, anything I could get my hands on. I really that was all I was doing at that point in time. So at that point, I went and worked in a restaurant called Bourbon Q. Loved it. Loved working as a chef. And then I actually left and worked at a few other places and came back as a waiter just to learn that front of house aspect as well. And whilst I was there front of house, I enjoyed that as much as I enjoyed the back of house, even though I loved the cooking side of things. But the front of house, I really enjoyed that, almost that power of really changing someone's experience for the better. Like that, I felt I could really have an impact on their experience.
And on that journey, because like it's very rare you see somebody say, okay, I'm going to make a 5-year plan. I'm going to master all these different skills. When did you know that now I know what concept, what restaurant you want to own, and what was it that actually, that was probably building blocks, but what was it in that journey that made you think this is what I need to do, this is what I need to bring to the market, and then you went for it?
Yeah, I think it was really organic. I definitely loved Middle Eastern food, and I loved the concept of sharing and family style food. And whilst I was working front of house, I really understood the like I said, the impact of you could have on the experience. And I guess chatting to tables and getting kind of that instant feedback, and also just seeing their reactions to food. And I think it was seeing their reaction to the plant-based or vegetarian options was the moment where that was probably my second light bulb moment, where it was like, hang on, I can see that they absolutely love this. And why couldn't we just have a restaurant that didn't serve meat? And what I didn't want to do was create, I guess, another Middle Eastern restaurant which served meat, fish, vegetables, and it kind of wasn't unique. So I think that was a really important moment for me. But also, once I had thought that was a good idea, then transferring that into a pop-up and then really honing that concept and getting live feedback from people coming to the pop-ups. And really, I think that was probably the moment that gave me the confidence to go and open a restaurant, because I think before that I had the idea, but I think you've really, to take that leap, you really have to have a lot of confidence in what you're doing, or perceived confidence. And I think I just needed to get to that stage before actually, I guess, investing in a bricks and mortar site.
And what was the key learnings you had on that pop-ups? Because principle, what you did was to test and learn, yeah, kind of base. But how long was that? And what was like your key learnings that you actually then took into creating the restaurant concept we know today?
Yeah, I think I say the key learning was just solving issues constantly. If you're going to go into a space at 4 p.m. and open the doors at 6 p.m. with all your prep, in a brand new kitchen that you've never seen before, you've really got to be thinking on your feet and also prioritizing what's important. So I think, yes, we were honing the concept, and obviously that was probably the main thing, and, really getting instant feedback and understanding what people liked and what they didn't. But also just that, I think from the mental side of, I hadn't been in the industry very long. I definitely didn't have the experience of other people that have, been on a longer journey. But I think being put in situations regularly, that's the kind of experience that I gained from it. I think the most, things that, now that we've got 3 restaurants, like I can see how important that 2 years were for me, because it really enabled me to be able to, I guess, think reactively, but also think reactively, under pressure, but in a calm way. So I think that's when you make your best decisions.
And under that journey, did you start out with the idea and the concept and the brand name? Everything was in stone as you did this pop-up? Have things changed as you learned as well from what you wanted to serve? Besides, you knew I wouldn't just do another Middle Eastern restaurant and I'm not going to serve meat, which is also a bold thing to do. Still, you would think, still, because plant-based is not the norm. It's not the norm to get people to eat plants. But was it clear to you what all the things that needs to happen, or did you change strategy and tactics on the journey of those 2 years?
Yeah, weirdly, it stayed pretty similar. I mean, I developed an idea called the Bubala Knows Best, which is a set menu and a way of eating where, you get your bread and dips to start, you get some small, really bold, flavorful snacks, and then we kind of moved to like the mains and sides. And if I had a menu to show you from our first ever pop-up, it was that format. It was the Bubala Knows Best, which is amazing. I guess that it was very clear then. I guess the dishes changed and we did tweak it. I think it was more, I'd say it was more tweaking in that period, but in essence, the concept was there. The name was there. I mean, the name Bubala is a Yiddish term for endearment, and it kind of was the first. It was what my grandma called me and what I called her. We called each other Bubala, and it kind of also was the spirit of what I wanted to achieve as well. Because that feeling of being looked after, welcoming, and that's what I got from going to her house. There was I'd say it was more tweaking the concept. It was actually something that was very similar from when we started.
And that's super interesting because that feels like almost like it's a feeling more than a
Definitely.
deep strategic analysis of this brand name would be the right, Bubala would be the right brand name and so on. This is like the feeling and actually a word that's been part of you. And therefore it came very natural the way you talked about it the first time we talked as well, of how you do everything from that name. And we'll come back to that in a second. But then, you launched brick-and-mortar, you have 3 sites today. How many years did it take you from going from that first site to the 3 sites, and how had that journey been? Because restaurant number 1 is hard, number 2 is even harder.
No, definitely. I mean, so we opened Spitalfields in September 2019, which was 6 months, obviously, before the dreaded C word. But I'd say, actually, I look back on that as fairly fortunate that we had at least 6 months, because within that time had built up 4 really positive critical reviews from, we had Jay Rayner from The Guardian, Marina O'Loughlin from The Times, William Sitwell, Jimmy Famuera from The Standard as well. And they definitely put us in the limelight, I guess, and gave us just enough to go into COVID with, I guess, some, kudos in the industry, whether it gave us enough strength, I think, to be able to continue to grow even in that period. And actually I definitely feel like we came out of COVID a lot stronger than we went in. There's lots of opportunities that we ended up doing in that period, but also we signed our second site in Soho right in the middle of it all, which was risky, but at the same time, I felt confident that we would be able to come out at some stage, and we got some good terms as a result. And then, so that was 3 years ago, and then we opened King's Cross earlier this year. So it's within a 6-year period that we've opened our 3 sites. But I definitely feel like COVID probably slowed us down in that respect.
Yeah, and maybe there was a healthy break too. We had headphones there. We talked about growth, and
definitely,
and we'll come back to that again. But how do you actually grow gracefully when you actually have initial confirmation of success? You want to scale that success, and if you can use these pauses that the world we're not in control of sometimes give us, you can actually maybe really try to understand the business model. And you said that was one of the learnings, and we don't want to talk too much about the C word, but actually there's some that came out of that, as you say, stronger. And that was probably because of the breather I often can hear when I hear back on those conversations. So you build something that is, if you go, and I've been lucky to go to one of your restaurants and eat there in Soho, and you can feel straight away it's radically different. It is, and the food is different, the brand is different, the culture is different. Is there anything that you, like, from a thinking point of view, already before you hired your first employee, decided this is what's going to make us different, and I need to keep on being have some strong principles about how we're going to do this as we grow the business?
I definitely think it's evolved throughout that period. I think one of the things that I wanted to ensure that I did was to just really focus on what was important at the time. And that for me was the food, the service, and the atmosphere. And kind of actually when it comes to, I guess, the values and the principles, I think it was just coming out of COVID, actually. There was me, an ops manager and executive chef, all sat in a room and actually just discussed all the I guess we just wanted to create our values based on how we were already operating. But what we didn't want to do is create new values and then aspire to them. We sat down and said, what are we doing well? And let's just put that into writing. And I think that was a really interesting process for me. And actually, I probably didn't understand how impactful that would be until now, because the 4 values that we came up with were expression, resilience, integrity, and compassion. They spell Eric as a acronym, but it really did just make it really clear to anyone that joined that these were the core principles that we wanted to abide by, and we were abiding by. And although I was in finance, I wasn't from a corporate world, and actually I'd never wanted to be in that kind of world. And I think the idea of having brand values that we shout about I found quite cringing at the time, but actually having gone through the process, I can see how just creating clarity amongst the team and it's just ensuring that they understand what is really important to us as we grow has been mind blowing, to be honest with you.
I think when you talked with it when we had the pre-call as well, what I thought was really interesting was, again, there's a bit of counterintuitive, actually not talking about what kind of values would we like to see, and then you can come up with want to see honesty, and but actually focusing on catching ourselves in what are we actually doing really well, what's happening really natural with the 3 or 4 main people that's running the business already, and what's happening out in the business, and what's catching yourself in what you're doing well. There's a guy called Ken Blanchard. There's a leadership guru, and he talks a lot about catching people in what they do well. And then how do you catch yourself in as a leadership group of a business to find out what you do well? Because you need to do more of that, because nobody else is doing that. And I think it's so interesting. And then you start putting it into writing, and then you reflect about it more. And what have actually happened then, because is that it's really interesting, because that's your guiding principles, in principle, how you run your business. And I guess that's both from a brand point of view, but also from a culture point of view. And then you have recently won an award as well, and you won the Code People Award, the happiest place to work in 2025. So congratulations with that.
Thank you.
And that means, there's something around your culture that your people are talking and say it's a special place to be. And you are, it's a big award to win. I think you're 3 restaurants. So it's quite amazing. What is it that you do then that makes you a different place to work, and actually why people think, because it's notorious very hard to create a happy workplace in hospitality, people say.
Yeah, I think trying not to abide by, I guess, industry norms. I think when I first came into hospitality, I think it was probably like on the back end of people still working crazy hours, not necessarily being paid for all of them as well. And I just think, I don't know, I think I wanted to really create a business and restaurant group that I was really proud of. And I think by doing things maybe a bit more accustomed to other industries, I think, and that gave me a different insight into how to treat people well. Not, you're treating them well for hospitality. I just, at my core, just wanted to treat people well. Obviously there are, limitations, but there's definitely ways in which you can really, I guess, prioritize the most impactful benefits or perks, or just, look, I think it also just comes down to just, treating them with respect. And I think those core values that I just mentioned have been amazing, not just for, I guess, the team interacting with each other, but the way in which we all interact with anyone that comes into the workplace, whether we're in service or not. It's more of a kind of, making sure that people, number one, feel heard, but also have the autonomy as well. I think one of the things that I've also had to learn along the way is to delegate. And I think I've seen the best come out of people when they are left to do their job. And I think it's very easy to, kind of step in. But I think we all know that, me personally as well, the best times I've learned are when I'm learning from mistakes. And I think that's also a really key point, is to allow people to learn that way too.
Yeah. And what do you do then as you grow the business, you won the award now? How do you scale the culture in a way? Because it's such a difficult thing to scale, and lots of restaurant groups or businesses to scale is actually, they often think it's going to be hard to get sales, but if it's going to be hard to get suppliers or whatever, actually what really is difficult is that thing, the invisible bit, the culture.
Yeah. And I think even when we had one site, I guess my biggest fear was how do we scale that culture piece, and how do we do it in a way that it's not going to be at a detriment to everything else we've built. And I think I'm pleasantly shocked at the way in which Bubala has grown, but improved along the way as well. Like, our culture has improved as we've got fingers so far. We're able to do much more. And also, we're able to have a support team as well, which enables us to continue to keep this at the forefront. So that, I guess as we grow, what we want to do is bring on people that also have the same values as we do, and ensuring that, like, at every possible moment we can get that through. And I think also keeping it quite simple. We have those 4 values, but that's easy for us to, pass on at any point. And I think that for me is the exciting part. Like, growing from 1 to 3 has been obviously difficult, but having seen the business evolve and develop into a much stronger culture as we've grown, it excites me even more that, we can continue to be on that journey.
It's very interesting to say, Mark, because I think it's Danny Meyer, if I remember right. Either I read it or heard it in an interview where he talks about like you need growth to build a better culture, because if you don't have growth, you're dying in principle. But again, you have to find out what is the right growth for the concept you have, and so you don't destroy the essence of it. And he said there's some restaurants, they can become 1 or 2, and others can become 100. So he was thinking about Shake Shack in that connection. But you need to understand what can it become and what does need to carry on in. And he said the culture will not develop if you don't grow the top line. That's just the reality. Even lots of people, that's what they're scared of, the next bit, but you need then to assess before you move. Also from a commercial point of view, how much space is there for a restaurant like this? So that's a super interesting way. And I think it's often that what you need to actually find out what can the culture become, because the culture will never be static. It always is in flow and always in change. Either you like it or not, either it's getting better or it's getting worse. So either you can decide on trying to influence it and put it in the right direction, or it will go the wrong way if you don't do anything and you don't are very aware of it. Do you have any systems, Mark, around your people journey that does actually, you keep it alive, you reaffirm it, any rituals, anything you do to make sure that the culture stays alive and still is foundation in the 4 principles we talked about before, Eric?
Yeah, I think I'd say one of the things that we did fairly early on as well was to create an internal communications. Well, we use an app called Blink, and we used Workplace before that, which was a Meta-owned internal communication as well. It sounds fairly simple, but I think what that actually signified to the team was that as one of the functions was a do not disturb module, which meant that obviously, we're open 7 days a week, but we tell our team that when you're off, you're off. You put your do not disturb on, so you will not get notifications on your app. If there is an emergency, we will obviously call you. But the whole idea is that, we don't want you to have lots of WhatsApp groups where they're constantly pinging all the time. And I think the reason I use this as an example is just that I guess it goes back to also respecting people's time off. And, one of the things we're constantly looking at is reviewing how many hours that people do. And we do want to keep bringing that down if we possibly can to enable people. I think it's so important. People do want to be doing things outside of work now, and we've got to react to that. And, so we're always looking at ways, I think being intentional and trying to, having it at the forefront, you can grow, but you still have to be intentional about how do we keep our culture and what are the things that we're going to put in place as we grow to enable that. And like you said, you do need growth to be able to do that, because, would we have had an internal app at one site? Probably not. So, all these things do come with growth. And I think as long as it is, one of the things that you are focused on, you can consistently and continuously improve that side of things as well.
What is the biggest learning you've had around growing culture as you have gone through this journey since the first site?
I think obviously, you can't be present at all times like you could with the first site. And I think one of the things, I think acknowledging that as well and not putting huge pressure on yourself to be present at all sites at all times. You do have to as well, we respect others and we also need to respect ourselves in that way, because that, you can't physically be everywhere. So I think, and, I think by not being there, you probably have to find ways to, I think transparency was a big one for me. I think earlier on in the early days, I kind of kept, I guess, all of the challenges and what might, financials and things like that. I probably kept them close to myself because I didn't want the teams to worry too much. And now, did we have a bad week? I was almost trying to be a safeguard on all of that. But actually what I've learned over time is be transparent. Like, people want to know how the business is doing. People want to also impact themselves how the business is doing. And I think as we've grown, I think that we are so transparent about everything we do, which I think has probably, that you probably, because you can't be everywhere, but if you're open and honest about where you are in terms of the business itself, I think that has probably helped on the growth period.
Yeah, and then it's quite amazing what happens when you get very vulnerable as a leader says, I don't have all the answers, I don't know, here's the financial, we're struggling with this, and actually how fast actually people help you solve those problems. And there's I think we talked about on the pre-call, there's a book called The Great Game of Business, a guy called Jack Stack that built this production company out in the middle of nowhere in Springfield, Missouri, in the US, and they were their best as they took it over at the worst point they could. It was probably worse than they thought. And actually, by being totally honest with the numbers, they turned that business around within 3 years. And there's a lot about involving, everyone from fixing machines. They were just fixing old, dirty engines and, recycled engines. And they grew that business from, it was having about $500,000 in revenue to suddenly $3 million in revenue. Yeah. And profitability grew and grew and grew. Today, it's they're not selling motors. They're still running the motor business, but they're selling education and how they did that. And it's really about daring to show people the reality of where the business is, because you have to go from creating employees to creating business people. Yeah. And that means you need to learn them how to run a business, which is actually quite difficult because we don't learn that in school. We learn how to follow order.
Yeah.
What has, been, besides that you had some learnings around the culture, but what's been some of the most toughest business moments of this journey, and how have they shaped you as an individual leader, and what have you taken forward from those learnings? Because obstacles is always what shapes and forms us. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know this is probably, it sounds quite pessimistic, but I do come into every day expecting something to go wrong, and it just keeps me prepared. Yeah. I don't see it as a negative. I don't feel like I'm a negative person, but I think just that in itself allows me to always be ready for anything that does, and also not get overly stressed by what can happen. Because I think the main learning is that, look, we opened in 2019. COVID was a big thing, and it was a huge challenge. But coming out of COVID was a challenge. What we're going through now is a challenge, and actually, in this period of 6 years, it's all been challenging. So I think not expecting it or even hoping for a smooth period, it puts you in the right mindset. I think you've kind of, this is the industry we've picked, and it is challenging, but see that as a positive. There are, the one thing I would say is, there is going to be obviously AI is going to play a big part in the future, but you are always going to have people wanting to eat. And I think, so there's always going to be a place for hospitality. So I think we do have to be positive about what's going. I think for me personally, for my mindset, staying positive and just, that does help me just kind of, I guess, wake up and tackle whatever's coming my way that day.
I love that, because actually I say to myself, I have these mantras I read up to myself, either aloud or on the way to somewhere in the morning. And it's actually it's a story. It comes from Stoicism, where Marcus Aurelius says that I expect that today that it will be people, lying to me, cheating me, trying to harm me. Things will go wrong, but that's part of it. That's why I'm here. Yeah. And he was the emperor of the Roman Empire. So it was not a small task at that point to deal with plagues and wars and whatever he dealt with, people that wanted to kill him every moment. And it's quite interesting. It's almost feel like that's not looking at the world positively. I've heard before that it actually is, because then actually whatever that comes, you say, oh, well, that's part of the world. And it's still, I can actually become more happy because I actually expected something will go wrong, instead of saying, oh, we made this plan and you didn't do what I expected to do. And sometimes you have to catch yourself in it, but it actually helps you, because in hospitality, things move so fast that somebody forgot to scheduling something, we didn't know those guests was coming, or whatever it is. And if you start to feel a bit grumpy, the ripple effect in the culture.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
It's so, I mean, it's so key because like you said, like even now that you don't really know, obviously the weekends are busy, but there are so many spikes in the week now that you kind of, it's almost impossible to predict. And, I think people often really want to plan for things and, have these like grand 10-year plans, but just sometimes, you just have to, it's the way in which you react to the challenges that come your way, which are the most important.
That's quite interesting. Well, again, I guess also if you talk about the future, you probably had this, how many sites are you going to be and so on. And I always feel that's a very interesting thing. And I said, when I was growing a restaurant here, I said, we're preparing for the future to open the most profitable sites. So how many? I don't know. But on a number, the next top number is probably 10, but I don't know how long the journey is going to take, but I'm going to make sure they're profitable and they're working before we build 100. Yeah. And I learned that from a very savvy guy that has opened a lot of restaurants, Andreas Carlson, the CEO of Sticks and Sushi. He once said to me when I showed him a business plan, I put in 1,000 restaurants, like young and naive. And he said to me, well, how many restaurant groups has done that? He said, and why should you be the one? And maybe you should start with one really well function first. Yeah. And that just changed my whole mindset of what I now call graceful growth. Yeah. Because you have to be humble about this and actually not try. I think you can plan everything in a spreadsheet and make it look good. You have to prepare for the future and then get ready all the time and train the muscle to be ready for number 4, number 10, Definitely. Number 20, and so on. Yeah.
No, agreed.
Yeah. When you look back and you look at yourself and you were we passed the pop-up, you're opening your first restaurant in Springfield Markets. What advice would you like to give yourself before you open that site? And if you could go back and redo that.
It's a really hard one because obviously I knew a lot less than I know now. But I almost feel like that naivety was so important back then, because I think if I knew as much as I knew now, I think I would question a lot more. I think I wouldn't go for things a lot more. And I think I don't know, sometimes being naive is not the word. I think, there's obviously lots of advice I could give, I don't know, really understand certain aspects of a lease or really, all those things that you learn along the way. But I think if I'd have known, I might not have even done it if I'd have known this much. I don't know. I just feel like sometimes that naivety is really important. And I think it actually has kept me going. I think sometimes if you know too much, it does stop you from taking those opportunities when they come.
Yeah, that's a very interesting way. Again, a little bit, you think very counterintuitive. You wanted to build a plant-based restaurant and scale that, and lots of people have tried that and not succeeded. And again, it's a bit counterintuitive. And how do you actually stay naive? I know it sounds like a negative word, but here's the positive thing, because I actually agree with you. How do you stay open-minded, you can say as well, like all the time? Because the more you learn about something, you start to build these barriers. No, it's not possible. Computer says no.
Yeah. And I think that happens a lot. I mean, look, when I first decided that I want to have a restaurant that just happens not to have meat, I obviously, started researching where there were those restaurants. And, there wasn't a huge amount. There was maybe 4 or 5 in London. And to get a bit of a broader idea, I went to Brighton as well. Again, maybe there was 2 or 3 there at the time. This is, maybe 8 years ago. And there was 2 reasons as to why there were that few in the market. And it was either there wasn't the demand, or what was out there maybe wasn't as exciting as it possibly could be. And I guess being naive and maybe inherently a bit of a risk taker, I just felt really confident that I could create something that was exciting. And, I think with vegetarian cooking as well, when I first started, it was that you've got this very low expectation of, for example, a boiled cauliflower. You had that growing up. When you think of vegetables, you think of it as a dish, almost something that was put on your plate as a kid because it was, it was healthy to do, and your parents wanted you to eat it. No one had really grown up being totally excited by what you could do with them. And I think, I don't know, that just really was exciting for me. And I think that's what sparked that kind of, well, actually, if you treat that vegetable like you would a piece of meat, for example, like, blanching a cauliflower, then roasting it high in the oven and then finishing it on a grill, like you're going to get a totally different product. And I think by seeing that untapped opportunity, I think that's what really inspired me.
And how do you actually make sure that it's not only you, but the rest of your team that is naive, open-minded, asking questions, challenging? Because I think that's all founders talk about, the startup, ability to be naive or innovative or whatever you call it. That actually is the special sauce, the energy of a startup. Yeah. How do you make sure that it's kept in there, and how do you play it out so it doesn't become like too much chain? Yeah.
Yeah. I think, again, I mean, look, when we first started, there was definitely things that I didn't realize about what we had created that was so special about it. And I think also the team probably didn't as well. And it's evolved over time, like, by probably constantly trying to improve the product. We've then, over time served lots of different people. And I think also the team that work with us have seen what I saw when I first started to think about it, where that, people's faces just light up at something that they've never had before, or they've never experienced, that surprise factor. And I think, especially with the team now, because, a lot of the team we have been promoted into senior positions. And actually, one of the things we love is kind of, bringing junior people in and seeing their growth into the most senior positions. And that's a big tactic of ours anyway. We definitely would like to bring people in on the journey as well. But I think that they also see it. They see it on a daily basis when they're serving customers, and when the customers come up to the pass and say, that was one of the best things I've ever eaten. I've never had a piece of halloumi taste that good. I've never had, falafel that are that good. I've never had a hummus topping that is so exciting, and I think a lot of people have this problem as well. Like, you can say what you want in a job interview as the employer, but I think once people are in it and see it, that, that's always been, the biggest thing for us, because we had a huge challenge at the start. I'd guess we were only really appealing to maybe plant-based people or people that didn't eat meat that worked with us. Now that, it's much wider, and, I'm not vegetarian myself. And I think, if you look at the teams, like there's not like, a big proportion that are, plant-based eaters. I think they've also seen how exciting the concept is, but it's not preachy. It's not, you come here because we don't want to serve meat. It's just an exciting way to eat vegetables.
And it's super interesting again, because the one thing is describing that concept, but then also get it lived out in 3 sites and, cooking plants. Anyone that listens in as a chef would know it's actually quite a skill. It's quite difficult skill to scale as well, to make people good at that. But you have to train at that, and like you do, and you're focusing on the innovation all the time. And then, if you have your employees really have that instant feedback from customers that this is some of the most amazing thing, you also start believing in it, and you start perfecting your skill even more, because I want that feedback, because that's
definitely,
that's a great feeling when people come up to the pass and say that. How do you show up as a leader of a business? It's a tough world, lots of energy you need. Do you have some kind of routines, hacks for how you create space and are able to be the founder, CEO you want to be?
Yeah, I mean, actually, something maybe 6 months ago I started putting into my routine was blocking out a Tuesday morning. I haven't actually told the team this, but I like to just block out a Tuesday morning, but I'm not looking at my phone. I call it, CEO time, and that's just time for me to just think about, I guess, the bigger picture, and think about where Bubala's going and what can we do to, be really impactful, just to take myself out of the day-to-day. I think so easily you can be, I remember you just can be so bogged down in the day-to-day and actually not look up. And I think that's one of the key learnings that I've had, is like, you really need to be able to do that in order to lead from the front. And when it does get a bit harder, have ideas and be ready to move on things. So I think that was a a big hack. And I just think also just try and always remember why you started it in the first place. You know, you do have to put lots of hats on, and you do have to, you know, speak to a property lawyer that you didn't think you needed to do when you're talking about starting a food concept. You do need to put your marketing hat on. And I think sometimes just taking aside and just being like, actually, why am I here? You know, what do I love about this brand? And just making sure that I'm constantly fueling that as well. Like making sure that, you know, the brand is at the forefront of my mind at all times. But that is something that is a work in progress at all times. I don't think you'll find any founder that feels like they're there and they can really just focus on those things at, you know, majority of their week.
No, and it's just that you need to take the time. That's like you're not going to be given it. You need to take that time, and I think that's really key. And I think like for that thinking time, it's so critical to block that time out. Also, you're not getting. Now the team knows that. You need to pick it up. What is you're most excited about right now, Mark? What is coming up that really you think like this is super exciting, and it could be something internally, also be something like that is coming up the next 6 months?
I mean, we haven't really told us excited, but we're pretty close on a fourth site, which is really exciting. So I just see, I don't know, for me, growing the company is the most exciting thing. I think seeing progression and seeing people, you know, one of the best things I think what I saw about with the King's Cross opening was that we took managers front of house and back of house from the other sites to fill all of our managerial positions at King's Cross. And for me, that was an amazing moment. And like, you know, that Code's happiest place to work was a big accolade and a big sense of pride for me. And it all kind of feeds into that, like the idea of, you know, opening more sites, but seeing progression at all levels and seeing, you know, like you said earlier, that growth that's enabling our culture to continually improve. I don't know, that's what I'm loving at the moment. I think just really making sure that we've got that at the forefront, and you know, we've hired a marketing manager and an ops director in the last 4 weeks. Preparing for that, you know, next stage of growth, and ensuring that we do it in a way where it's exciting and it's sustainable, and we're not kind of, you know, I want everyone to be excited for this journey. And I think that's what's keeping me inspired day to day, and just, you know, seeing that the growth is happening, being able to focus on the growth as well now that we've got a support team that is growing, and just looking for opportunities. I guess that's what's exciting and coming up in 2026.
Oh, well, that's also a very exciting point, because that's the, you know, site number 4. There's some kind of magic around that. If you look at the theoretical and academic approach to running restaurant, number of a restaurant, then you have 4, then you have 10, then you have 25, then you have 50, then you have 100 plus, and then totally different. But it might not be where you want to go as well. Where actually you want to go? Is there any massive ambitions, or how do you look at the future from a number of sites point of view? We didn't touch on that.
Yeah, I think like you said, I mean, the number doesn't. I had a business plan when I first started, which said 5 sites. I think now it doesn't seem so far away that I know that that's, you know, probably not the end. But what excites me is I do think there is going to be a point where the number will grow to a certain number of sites, and the quality will start to dip, and you know, the culture might start to dip. And I think for me, I want to flex that as much as possible. Like I want to grow, but I don't want to grow at the expense of what has been created. So I think for me, it's like you said, it's not the number of sites, it's the ability to continuously grow and feel like I'm still having an impact. You know, the product's improving all the time. I think as soon as it gets to the point of I'm looking at, well, if we go that supplier, it's going to save us 2p on this product, I think that's when I'm not going to be the right person for this role. But I definitely, you know, as long as the journey is the way it's going, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm being impactful, and we're having the right conversations that get me excited, I'll continue. But And also, look, we've got other aspirations within the company as well. We do catering events, but we definitely want to explore that as a much more
interesting.
I've been
because that's also growth. It's not size,
exactly,
but it's growth, massive growth in revenue and high profit. Lots of people miss those opportunities. Yeah,
100%. And for me, I've seen a huge gap in that kind of corporate and event catering where there was a point maybe 5 years ago where I had a wedding kind of every month or so, and I was kind of shocked at the offering and how little excitement there was, I guess, around the food at, say, a wedding. And I just kind of came away from that thinking I really see a huge gap here, and I think we could the food that we do is perfect for that kind of event without taking I guess we don't want to take it is about, a wedding is about the bride and groom, but we want to just enhance that experience for everyone involved. So, the food is something you can be proud of on the day, and also come from a value perspective as well. Like we're not there to charge a premium amount for this. We think we can be a really fair and an amazing option for people when they're looking for these events.
And it's quite interesting because catering or events, or especially catering to corporate offices and so on, like, it's very unsexy. I have experience with it myself. But how do you actually make that sexy? Yeah. How do you actually, and because it actually is very profitable if you already have the capacity. You're just building on the existing capacity to do something in the hours you normally wouldn't do anything. And that's why it's super, super interesting. Yeah. Love that. That was a good little, segue. What is the one question, Mark, you would have liked me to ask you that I didn't ask you, and what would it be, and what will you answer?
Yeah, I guess for people that are listening who are potentially looking at, starting their own thing, or I think just, what should, I guess something like on the lines of like, what should you prioritize when you're setting up or thinking about, for example, opening a restaurant? I think because I think people obviously, they have an idea, they really want to do it, but I think just proving concepts is so important. I think people want to jump from, I've got this idea, I just need to do it. But I think there's a massive stage in the middle where, I touched on it earlier, that pop-up stage, but you can really just make a lot of mistakes in that period, and there's no issue. Like you've got so much time to spend really just honing in on that concept. And you find out so much along the way of like what's good and what people like. And I think people are very quick to just miss that step or feel that they know that their idea is so super strong. I think like you can also just learn things in the way that you may have just missed. And I think, I don't know, I'm sure there's plenty of restaurants that have opened without doing that stage. But for me, that was the key to opening.
Yeah, love that. A great question, because lots of people often are really struggling about when to take action. Yeah. And, also the inaction is actually often the biggest problem. Yeah. You need to, when you have that energy in that moment and the train is passing you, you need to go and do it. Yeah. I think that's actually lots of what the difference is from somebody that found something that becomes successful and others, is that they actually went and did it. And even if they failed, when they did another thing, and and then they always come back. Yeah, back to you talk about resilience at some point.
Yeah, and I think when you don't have responsibilities as well, like that was. I mean, if you said to me, "I'm going to start now," I'm with 2 kids under 3 years old and be married, I don't think I would have. So take that
the better.
Yeah,
I would say that as well, because I had 1 kid when I started. I was tough enough. Yeah. Earlier the better. Yeah. I totally agree. Where can people connect with you, Mark, if they have more questions or want to know more about what you do, and where do they find you?
Yeah, I mean, you can add me on LinkedIn, Marc Summers. But I think one of the best things about this industry is that people are so willing to connect, and if anyone does want to connect and chat over coffee or whatever, I'm always open to listening to ideas and help if I can in any way.
Great. Thank you, Mark. I'm sending you and the team power and energy for the exciting journey ahead. And thank you so much for sharing your journey and your learnings with the community.
Amazing. Thanks for having me, Michael.